And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back listening to the Power of Three podcast. It's the start of the week, so of course that means it's time for a look at another Doctor Who novel from the past. I'm Kenny Smith, and today, that theme tune will tell you, it's a second Doctor adventure. We're looking at The Colony of Lies, which was the 60th novel in the BBC Past Doctor Adventure series. It was written by Colin Brake and released on the 7th of July 2003, and it featured the second Doctor, Jamie McCrimmon and Zoe Herriot, as well as the 7th Doctor and Ace in a brief couple of cameos. As we take a look at the cover from Black Sheep, we can see a reversed picture of Patrick Troughton. I think that's the same one that appeared on the cover of one of the books with the Serrations by Steve Lyons, The Final Sanction, but flipped. Anyway, we can see there's a sort of moody looking sky, there's some mountains, and in front of that there's a western town in a dead-end world with sand. We can see wooden buildings, there's a clearly signed saloon bar, and there's someone sitting on a horse, so it pretty much tells us all we need to know. This is pretty much a book in a cowboy type setting. Let's have a look at the back cover blurb. According to popular legend, the great humanitarian Stuart Ransom founded the independent Earth colony on Axista 4 in the year 2439. But the truth is not as neat and simple as the legend would suggest. The year is 2539. Arriving on Axista 4, the Doctor, Zoe and Jamie find a colony in a state of chaos. A breakaway group of colonists, the Realists, has abandoned Ransom's back to basics ideals and is creating a high-tech settlement. The Loyalists who remain are dwindling in number and face total extinction. Meanwhile, a spaceship from Earth has arrived with news that 80,000 refugees are about to descend upon the planet. The Realists are staging raids on the wreck of the colony ship, and in a secret underground bunker, mysterious aliens who claim to be the planet's first colonists are beginning to awake. Who are the dog-like aliens who call themselves Terranians? What is the secret agenda of the sinister Federation Administrator Green? And what really happened when the colony ship crash-landed on Axista 4 100 years ago? Lots of questions. So, shall we try and answer some of them? Why don't we kick off with a reading from the book? And this is courtesy of our friend Craig Brawley.
The image on the scanner could not have been more unprepossessing if it had tried. All Zoe could make out in the general darkness was a plain, metallic-looking wall. "It's a spaceship," she announced, unable to keep a sigh out of her voice. "Or a space station." "Oh, well, there's a surprise," muttered Jamie from the far side of the six-sided console. "And no doubt there's a whole horde of monsters lurking just out of sight, ready to jump on us as soon as we step out the TARDIS." Jamie was dressed, as usual, in his kilt. His ever-ready skein-doo skipped into his knee-length socks. Zoe turned from the scanner and smiled at Jamie. He clearly shared her lack of enthusiasm at their new landing site. Perhaps they could persuade the Doctor not to explore for once. They could outvote him 2-1. Not that the TARDIS was run on democratic lines. This space-time ship had but one captain, and even he didn't always seem to have much control over the vessel's journeys. Zoe had a sudden flash of inspiration. The key to getting the Doctor to do what they wanted was to make him think it was his idea. All they had to do was hijack his natural enthusiasm and apply it to the notion of leaving immediately without exploring. But how? Zoe hadn't yet found an answer to that, when the door to the TARDIS interior opened and the man himself, if indeed he was a man, Zoe had her doubts on the matter, emerged, brandishing what appeared to be a small chocolate bar in one hand. The confectionery was partly eaten, and a smear of brown around the Doctor's mouth told the rest of the story. Zoe wondered for a split second whether the Doctor, on a chocolate high, was more or less likely to be manipulated into a speedy exit. "Doctor," she began, "you're right But before she could finish her sentence, the doctor had interrupted her. "Right, of course I'm right. That food machine has to go. Taste this." He waved the remains of the snack bar in the direction of Zoe, who rapidly raised her hands and shook her head. The doctor turned to Jamie, who was already reaching for the bar. "I am famished," said Jamie, taking the proffered bar and devouring it in 2 quick bites. Almost immediately, a pained expression came over his face as he screwed his features up in disgust. "What the devil is this?" he exclaimed. "Strawberry jam and peanut butter," explained the doctor simply. "But that's a horrible combination," Jamie complained. The doctor was nodding in agreement. "Terrible, terrible. Like I said, that food machine has got to go. I'll have to open up one of the galleys. I think there's one a floor or 2 below." He paused, thinking, "Or maybe above. Never mind, I'm sure we'll find it." The doctor looked around the console room with a critical eye, as if weighing up a spot of redecoration. "You know, I always fancied a kitchen area in here, somewhere to make a nice cup of cocoa. Maybe one day." He trailed off, then suddenly seemed to become aware of the scanner displaying the gloomy view outside the ship. "Oh my, have we landed? I hadn't noticed." The doctor, all thoughts of food, kitchens and redecorating gone from his mind, hurried to the console to check the readings. Zoe and Jamie exchanged a quick, anxious glance. It was now or never. "Actually, Doctor, I was just saying you were right in what you said the other day about our next stop." "Our next stop?" questioned the doctor, not looking up from the dials he was scanning. "Yes," Zoe continued, gathering in confidence. "You were saying we needed some fresh air, some countryside, a bit of sunshine. Anything but another space station, that's what you said. Isn't that right, Jamie?" Jamie was frowning, trying to recall a conversation that had never taken place. "I don't remember that," he began before Zoe quickly cut him off. "Of course you do." She shot him a significant look and wiggled her eyebrows and was relieved to see the penny drop. "Oh, aye, that's right, Doctor. You said you'd find us somewhere to remind me of the Highlands." "Did I?" Zoe wasn't sure whether the doctor was buying this or not. She made a "go on" sign at Jamie, who floundered for a moment and then continued. "You said you'd find us somewhere to relax, with plenty of sun, the great outdoors, plenty of peace and quiet." "Like this?" asked the doctor. Jamie and Zoe looked at him and found that he was waving in the direction of the scanner. The doctor was adjusting a knob that seemed to control the camera that fed the scanner. The display now showed another section of the grey corridor, but one with a great tear in the fabric, beyond which a vast expanse of sparsely grassed plain was visible. Even in the black and white of the monitor, the gleaming sun could be seen reflecting off small lakes. It was as tranquil a view as Zoe or Jamie could hope to see. In unison, they both sighed. The doctor turned to them both, steepling his hands and grinning with his regular enthusiasm. "Shall we explore?" he suggested. And without waiting for an answer, he reached for the door-opening control.
Lovely stuff, as always, from Craig. Now, let's find out more about the book itself. So let's go from Colony of Lies to Colin Brake of Truth. Yeah, that's definitely up there as one of my worst puns ever.
Hello, I'm Colin Brake, and I wrote Colony of Lies.
So Colin, this was your one and only PDA.
It was, and I was really pleased because obviously I'd written Escape Velocity for the 8th Doctor line, and it was interesting to do something of that scale in prose, because as primarily a TV writer, I'm used to writing scripts rather than prose. So obviously I'd written the short story in prose, I've written that novel in prose, and one of the frustrations with Escape Velocity was that it was about a doctor who didn't have a TARDIS and was recovering his memory and had been stuck on Earth for the best part of 100 odd years. So there was some frustration there. It's like, oh, I'm finally getting to do Doctor Who, but it's not Doctor Who. So, as I say, frustration. So when I got the chance to do a PDA, I thought, at last, I get to do a proper Doctor Who. It can be out in space. It can be, it can feature aliens. It would be much easier sort of project. And again, I could get to pick and choose and focus on a Doctor and TARDIS team that I wanted to write for. And I'd already written for the Second Doctor in the short story in Decalogue, a short story that often is ignored in Decalogue because it comes immediately after the story by Stephen Moffat. And, what a thing to follow.
That's continuity errors, isn't it, in Decalogue 3?
It is continuity errors, which is such a glorious thing, and is a prequel to all the sort of things he did as showrunner, really, playing around with time and the whole River Song story and all that stuff. Stuff is there. So anyway, I had played with the Second Doctor, and the Second Doctor was really my Doctor. You know, that common notion that your Doctor is the first Doctor you really remember watching. And, although I'm technically old enough to have watched Hartnell, because I'm a year and a half older than the programme, I can't say as I saw any. I may have done. It hasn't stuck in my memory. I don't know about you, but I find my very early memories are very vague. As I get older, some things pop up, but a lot of the people are, my parents are no longer around. I don't see my sister that often. So the people who could prompt those memories are not in my life much. And so I'm never quite sure whether I'm remembering or whether I'm remembering a memory, or even remembering a memory. So I'm fairly certain that my first real memory of watching Doctor Who was Patrick Troughton in black and white. Might even have been at my grandma's house in South Harrow, in front of a Calagas fire on a small, probably great big box of a TV with a small screen. And I'm fairly certain it involved foam. So that could be anything in the second half of the Troughton era, couldn't it? I sometimes think it might have been Wheel in Space, but I'm not sure. I just don't know. But that TARDIS team, Doctor, Zoe, Jamie, I'm fairly certain were the first ones I encountered. And then a couple of years later, I would have been, I remember watching Joe Grant and Unit and the Third Doctor, but my first ones, and the Doctor Who's, when we were buying those Target books in the early 70s, the ones I so looked forward to getting were the Second Doctors, because he was my Doctor. He was the Doctor I remember encountering first. So I was really excited to do a Second Doctor story. And then for some obscure reason, I guess because I had this timey-wimey element, I gave it a Seventh Doctor and Ace bookend, because it kind of fitted in with the theme, which is all about myths and legends and how things accrue their own truth over a period of time. And that may not be anything like what was originally intended. So that was the main theme, I think, for the story, and everything came from there. Another big sort of factor in the story was my fascination with America. So by this time, 2003, I'd been to America a couple of times, but I'd always been interested. And I did a minor at in my first degree, I did a minor in United States Studies. So I was really interested in the whole America history, culture, etc. So there's a lot of that in this book too. There's thinking about America's status as a colony and how it rebelled against the authority that had set up the colony, the British government. There's something about how the Constitution has become a kind of set in stone document. I mean, the whole business about gun control and how that's the NRA will always point to the Constitution as giving you the right to bear arms without having any sense of the context and everything else. So there's something about that in there too, which I realized when I reread the book. I was like, oh my goodness, I can see where that's come from. How conscious it was at the time, I don't know, but it's definitely there. It's definitely a theme that I was playing with. And then you have the other big thing is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, John Ford film, in which the Jimmy Stewart character has this reputation as the man who shot Liberty Valance. And in flashback, which is the main bulk of the film, we discover that it wasn't him at all. It was the John Wayne character, who was a washed up sheriff type. But the newspaper man said, "We don't worry about the truth, we print the legend." Print the legend. And that was always something that stuck with me as a really interesting thing, the way that we do often choose to print the legend, take the accepted history, go with what feels right for us rather than what is perhaps the truth. And when you look at the way we study history or the way we represent history, it's always a struggle between actually representing what happened and presenting it in a way that works for the audience that is reading it, which I think is really interesting and fascinating. And it happens all the time. And you only have to look at the way we look at the world around us and how we interpret things. We're always skewing things to make it work for now. So that was another major theme. So those were the major themes of the story, which makes it sound really heavy. But what it also was me getting a chance to write a space adventure and throwing everything but the kitchen sink into it.
I think that at this point, I think there'd been the Gunfighters obviously on TV, and I think there'd been the Seventh Doctor novel Heritage, which again had that kind of cowboy feel. So I suppose it is something of a territory that after the Gunfighters, a lot of writers tended to stay away from that kind of setting. But I think going back in there just to show that the Gunfighters isn't that bad. It's that Jeremy Bentham myth that's sort of grown up over the years to it's the worst thing ever. But here you actually go in and it's actually a right world ready for the plucking.
Well, there you go. And if there ever was a case of print the legend, the way that we accepted the judgments on the black and white era in the 70s and the 80s based on early Dwas things and the like, and then you realize you come to it now, and we're having the same thing happen. We're having people who are coming to Doctor Who in the last 20 years because of the revival, who are looking back and seeing the things that we hold dear with different perspective in different ways. Hence the controversy over things like Talons of Wen-Chiang, which I'm sure we were not unaware of, but it kind of glossed over us in the 70s because actors in yellowface was commonplace. It was not a thing to have problems with. However, you look back and you go, stow me, that's no better than the black and white minstrel show. What were we doing? Does it stop you enjoying that program? I hope not. But it's always going to be there now. But that's a perfect example, isn't it, of how we do print the legend and then change your views. And yes, I mean, the American West is a fascinating setting for stories. I mean, one of the things I did in that United States Studies course was look at a whole thing about the Western culture in books and films. And one of the films we studied was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And that is another whole area of mythology that has built up and become the accepted case. And actually the truth of it was much more interesting and complicated than what you might get from a John Ford Western, and that's begun to become more addressed in things like the later Peckinpah Westerns, The Wild Bunch, for example, and then Westerns more recently have also looked at that whole area in different ways. I suppose Brokeback Mountain would be an example. Dancing with Wolves would be an example. So these things it's a rich area to play with and to look at. And if you're absolutely right. In Who, we'd had the Gunfighters, we had Dale's book and then my book. Subsequently, there's been lots of, there was a whole book of a story set in America. I've gone back to that Western setting. I did a Western setting, Decide Your Destiny book. And I think the short story, the novella I did, which was a flip book with Ollie Smith, I think that was a Western story too.
The Good, the Bad, and the Alien.
That's it, The Good, the Bad, and the Alien. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I've gone back to it myself because it's an area of fascination.
Yeah. And Big Finish have done it with a companion chronicle for the Sixth Doctor and Evelyn as well. There was The Runaway Train, which I think was one of Ollie's as well. So yes, there's been quite a few since then. Yeah. I suppose in some ways that having that sort of recognisable setting that we all know what a Western town looks like and have the feel of it makes things a bit easier for your world building compared to having to do something like Vortis or the Sense Sphere.
Absolutely, and that's really helpful. And in the early part of the book, I was able to play on that a lot and give that iconography that's quite familiar. And then you start to subvert it with all the sci-fi trappings and the bits and pieces that don't fit and shouldn't fit and are weird. And that's part of the fun of it, isn't it? It's I think stories like Face of Evil, where you have that, apparently primitive tribe, and yet all the stuff in the base is, old space helmets and things, isn't it? It's a lovely thing to play with. I quite like it.
So how did you find writing for the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe? I would imagine then that's probably one of the easiest things you've ever had to do in terms of writing, because their voices are all so distinct.
I do find writing for them a joy. I'd love to write for them again. I think it's great fun. And yes, I mean, that second Doctor character lives in my head rent-free, as they say, with all the, oh my giddy aunt, and I can see his face, I can hear his voice, I can see his movement. And Zoe and Jamie too, really clear in my head. I just have a sense of them. I enjoyed when I wrote the short story. It was like, yeah, I know I can do this, and so that was a joy to do, really. And then to put them through this big, epic. I mean, I'd forgotten. I mean, you write these things, and then 20 years later you reread them. You go, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of plot. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I was surprised at how much plot there was and what they get involved with, and things like AI and DNA splicing. I mean, I'm not saying I was ahead of the curve, but I was certainly surfing the zeitgeist, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, you think when you look at the colonists divided into the realists and the loyalists, which are in many ways could be perceived as to what's currently happening in the US, the progressives and those who would like to go back to the way things perhaps were 150 years ago.
Possibly the US, possibly Doctor Who fandom. I mean...
Very true. Yeah, and then you throw into that mix the Tyranians, the dog-like aliens as well.
The dog-like aliens who, spoiler, aren't aliens at all. Yes, I mean, that was, again, it's building in this notion of lies and truth and what you're going to believe, so that you have that whole business at the end of the book where the Doctor go-alongs with creating a false backstory for the alien Tyranians, rather than the truth getting out, which again is classic print the legend. It's let's emphasize that, because that actually works better for us now. Thank you very much. And works better for them and everybody, and the future of this planet. So yes, that's very true.
Because I think that it feels like it's a very, very modern, and as you say, it's perhaps seeing what's coming further down the line without actually expecting it to do that sort of people in conflict. And perhaps at the time we would never have foreseen this actually happening, but unfortunately that's the way the world has gone.
No, I mean, it is. It's fascinating to go back and read it and realise that the whole notion of real news and truth and what's Trump's thing called? Truth social. I mean, it's like, these words begin to lose their meaning, don't they? It is fascinating.
Yeah. How did you find creating the colonists?
It was fun. The other big influence I think that I've not mentioned is probably Colony in Space, the Third Doctor story, which was really, I suppose. I mean, the other one is the Mutants as a colony, doesn't it? So it popped up a couple of times in Pertwee, this notion of us spreading out and having colonies through known space. Yeah, I mean, you've just got a mixture of people. You've got the people who have specific roles and specific relationships to the notion of keeping the ransom ideals of no tech, allegedly no tech, true. So it's about creating interesting relationships. You've got the fact you've got the doctor, the medic, and her ex-partner split across the two groups, and you've got the grandfather and the grandson. So it comes back to my soap background, I think, in terms of trying to inhabit the space with a range of characters that have got different ideas and opinions about the things that are going to be happening in the plot. So you have a variety of people, and so that it's not just these are the colonists and they do this, and these are the guys on the Federation ship and they do this. So again, on the Federation ship, you have Vina, who's much more sympathetic to things than Ransom, and Administrator Green, the bad guy, who again you read it and think, oh, this guy needs to meet the Doctor again. I better get on to Big Finish, and but yeah, they've all got different agendas and different attitudes, and so by filling your story with these, you get to investigate all those approaches to the events of the story, and I think, as I said, that's going back to my soap background. You have this range of characters.
Just when you mentioned your soap background, I mean, for some people, I remember when Russell T brought Doctor Who back, and he mentioned that there would be that sort of continuing drama element, soap, that a lot of people thought it was a dirty word, but actually, look at the most popular TV shows, and people love soaps. It's because of the drama of it and the interactions of the characters, the developments, the story journeys they go on, the arcs, and that's very much feeds into this.
Yes, I mean, one of the things about soaps is their longevity. So you have this long-going continuity. It's why soaps and shows like Star Trek and, of course, Doctor Who, who've also been around in one form or another for 40-odd years, 50-odd years, 60-odd years, there's some similarities there because you can make callbacks. The fact that in the very latest series of Doctor Who, you can have suddenly Susan appear in the Doctor's mind, calling back to 1963 when she left, is wonderful. And the soaps do the same thing. You bring characters back who buggered off 20 years ago. Or in the case of EastEnders, when you have poor Martin Fowler dying 40 years after, pretty much after he was born, in the 40th anniversary story, immediately afterwards, you bring back Vicky, who was Michelle's daughter, who was the product of the pregnancy she fell to with Dirty Den in that first year of EastEnders. It was, it calls back and makes those connections. It made me laugh because, as you probably know, back in 1994, I wrote a book, EastEnders, the first 10 years, just as I was leaving EastEnders myself. And at the end of that book, I said, well, who knows what the future will bring, but 30, 40 years' time, no doubt Martin Fowler and Vicky will be causing mayhem in the square. And, okay, they killed one of them off, but they're both been there in this 40th year, which is quite amusing, really. Cool, that one.
Yeah, I just have thought, where does Dimensions in Time fit into EastEnders lore? How do EastEnders fans view it? Is it an aberration? You know what Doctor Who fans think of it?
I don't know, because it happened after I'd moved on. Although I do feel guilty for having placed the idea in Gary Downey's head. Because Gary Downey was frequently production manager on EastEnders, and I do remember at a lunch we were sitting there, I don't know, because other people had been around, and I think I said, wouldn't it be cool if the TARDIS materialized in the back of shot and just was there, and then we carried on, and then it disappeared again? I said that would be so cool. And I don't know whether that popped in. Gary held that and went back and said to John, do you know what? But who knows? Who knows? I tell you what it does make me think of is those idents at the start of the present series, where Ncuti dropped into all sorts of different BBC programs, didn't it?
Yeah.
Which was, it's like, okay, good ideas. They find their way in the end.
Just a shame you didn't copyright it.
Can you copyright something? I doubt it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I think in terms of canon, I think there are probably Doctor Who fans who are willing and will do mental gymnastics to try to make it canon. Whereas for EastEnders people, I don't think it's canon, and I think just on the visuals of Pauline and Kathy older than they were, I don't know, we said 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead, but it doesn't match with what we now know happened to those characters. So it's an aberration. It's for EastEnders, non-canon. For Doctor Who fans, make it canon if you can.
Well, do you know what? It's probably the effects of the Time War in Albert Square. That's why.
There you go.
So that's why Pauline was alive in 2013.
Yeah.
2013. Oh, my God, we've turned this into a Dimensions in Time discussion. That's not the plan. Sorry, that was my distraction.
That's timey-wimey. You know, that's what happens, isn't it?
Yeah. So, any other highlights when you were going through the book?
I was pleased that it held up. Pleased that the plot held together, even though there's a lot of it, and there's quite a lot of twisty bits that work quite well. I think the storytelling works. There's a little bit of mechanics going on, so that the Doctor finds out some of the plot and Zoe finds out some of the plot in two different ways. That I'm not sure is the most elegant thing, but it works. And I was surprised at how well it holds together. I don't know what anybody else would make of it, but I was pleased with it, and I was quite pleased with the ending, the way it all ties in, and the Seventh Doctor had done a little bit of manipulation of the thing to make sure it works, which is very Seventh Doctor. That's probably why it was the Seventh Doctor. It felt it needed a Doctor who would do that. You know, had I known then what I know now, it could have been the 12th Doctor who might have nipped back and done that. Who knows?
Very much, yeah.
But yes, so no, I was quite pleased. I mean, I love the setting. I love the fact that you have this colony ship crash there sticking out of the ground. It's a lovely visual, and I was really pleased with the artwork that presented it on the cover. And what's interesting again is going back and realizing that as a writer, there are themes that pop up in a lot of my work that I perhaps hadn't realized, but there's things in here that I can see have popped up into things that I have written subsequently, and indeed more recently, that like you're revisiting and reworking some of those things that fascinate you and why they fascinate you. And I think we've talked about those things. There's that idea of blind faith to a mantra or a way of thinking, and how dangerous that can be, and perhaps how limiting that can be, and how sometimes you have to allow things to move on and change, because that's what life does. It moves on and changes and evolves. And the world is not the world it was in 2002, or indeed 1962, or etc.
I also think it was rather nice, just you mentioned right at the start about the framing story. It meant you finally did get your chance to get your hands on the Seventh Doctor and Ace, having been denied it on TV.
That was the other thing, I suppose. Yes, I mean, it's all ticking off Doctors you've written, isn't it? I've done 1, I've done 2, I've not done 3, I've not done 4, which is a shame. Done 5, did that for Big Finish.
Mm-hmm.
Not done 6. Oh, I have done 6. No, I think I have done 6. 7, 8. Love to do 9. Get that Big Finish on the phone.
Get that speed dial going.
But yeah, it was nice to actually finally get to, since I'd got close, and we'll never know. It's a sliding doors moment, isn't it? You just don't know. Of all the sliding doors moments in my life, I think that's one of the most tantalizing. Is if they'd done another series, Andrew would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have got it? You know, I suspect I was the best position because I was one of the few staff script editors left.
Yeah,
and certainly only with any interest in it. And you know, it would have been fun. I would have used Robin Mukherjee. I would have used Ben Aronovich. I would have used Ian Briggs, and there'd be more stories from them back then. So who knows?
Yeah. Oh well, Robin Mukherjee's about to be released upon us with Alexian. So
I know. I was delighted to see that because Robin was the next off the line of Andrew's findings. Because Andrew was very good at because he'd been at the script unit, he was very good at finding new writers. And then I kept nicking them for EastEnders. As I told you before, I took Graham Curry. I tried to take Ben. I actually commissioned Ben for some storylines for EastEnders. Just give me some stories. Just some stories. Never delivered. Good old Ben. So Robin was the next find, and I remember Andrew being very excited about Robin's work. So I'm delighted to see that story finally coming out on Big Finish.
Yeah, well, it's been great as always, Colin. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, always a pleasure.
Brilliant stuff as always. So thank you once again, Colin. Now, before we continue and get the review from the time and what people are saying about Colony of Lies now, let's have our second reading from Craig Brawley.
When the Doctor and Jamie came back to Cartwright's office, they were delighted to see that Zoe was awake and on her feet again. Dee, however, still looked worried. "I do think you should rest a little more," she said anxiously. "Really, I'm fine now," insisted Zoe. "Excellent," said the Doctor, coming through the door. "You see, Jamie, I told you she would be all right." Zoe looked up at the Doctor, a serious expression in her dark eyes. "Doctor, I need to talk to you about what I've found out." The Doctor nodded. "You know what happened at Planet 4? Everything that was recorded by the colony ship's semi-sentient computer. It was awful." "Yes, I rather suspect it must have been. The ship was shot down by automatic defensive systems the Tyrrhenians had left in orbit, yes?" Zoe pouted, annoyed that the Doctor seemed to know everything already. "That's why the damage was so random," she added, a little sniffily. "And do you know what happened after the crash?" asked the Doctor gently. "Don't you?" she retorted, still annoyed at him. "I know a version of what happened, the Tyrrhenian version. I'd like to know what the colony ship's version of events is," replied the Doctor, evenly. "It was all very confused," Zoe said. "All sorts of systems got damaged, first from the attack and then during the crash itself. But I think I know what happened. You remember that robot we found in the hold when we first arrived? Some kind of automated battle droid. Nasty little thing," the Doctor recalled. "It's a Tennyson 405 EBD, Enhanced Battlefield Droid," Zoe told him precisely before adding, "There are 1,000 of them on standby in that hold." "What?" Dee was shocked. "There are battle droids hidden on the wrecked colony ship?" Zoe nodded sadly. "But how did they get there? What were they doing on a civilian colony ship?" demanded Dee. "According to the records, they were placed on the ship by the regulating body of the Federation, a quid pro quo for the public presentation of the colony mission as being completely independent of Federation control." "I don't understand," said Dee, frowning. "Are you saying we are not an independent colony?" The Doctor turned to her. "With the current Federation, very little is completely independent. An outreaching colony like this had military value. By persuading Ransom to take this little army, the Federation was getting a defensive deployment for very little outlay. The strategic thinking had been that by having forces like this on outlying colonies, they had a speedy means of defense should they face any alien incursion, like the Dalek threat they are currently dealing with elsewhere. No doubt Ransom argued about it, but at the end of the day it did allow him to launch the colony ship, and, as far as he was concerned, the droids were never going to be used. That's right, added Zoe. According to the recordings he logged with the system here, he intended to drop the lot of them into the first expanse of water he came across. Unfortunately, he never got the chance. The Doctor picked up the story, because the Terranian satellite fired on the colony ship, which triggered an automatic reaction from the battle droids. The EBDs have a degree of sophistication far above your average robot. They were able to react to the attack and plan a strategic assault on the perceived aggressors, Zoe continued. They left the wreck of the colony ship and initiated an attack on the tiny Terranian settlement. It was all but wiped out in minutes. Dee was horrified. And we just sat back and watched this happen? No, said the Doctor quickly. Of course not. Ransom made every effort to abort the attack. In the end, he actually assaulted the Federation AI that was overseeing the EBD action. It took time, but he was successful. He did manage to override the AI and order the EBDs back where they had come from. But it was too late for the majority of the Terranians. Their settlement was devastated, leaving only a few of their kind who had evacuated to their underground bunker to survive in deep sleep. So Ransom did the right thing? Asked Dee, still stunned by all of this. He tried, and he paid the price, the Doctor explained. The Federation AI activated a medical drone and killed him before going offline itself. The birth of this colony required a lot of death, he added solemnly. Zoe was looking puzzled. But Doctor, she began. The Doctor hushed her with a wave of his hand. Not now, Zoe, eh? I think this has all been quite enough for one day. As Dee said, you need some rest. Zoe bit her lip, looking frustrated as the Doctor ushered Dee out of the room. Jamie hesitated in the doorway. What's up? He asked, recognizing the look on her face. Nothing, Jamie. Come on, Zoe, I know you're better than that. You were going to say something just then, weren't you? Did the Doctor get something wrong? Zoe thought for a moment, running the memories she had absorbed from the colony ship through her head. Yes, she said finally. I think he did.
Thanks again, Craig. Now, at this point, we're going to turn to Doctor Who magazine to see what Matt Michael had to say in his review. I think it'd be fair to say that Matt had probably run out of milk for his tea when he wrote this because he didn't particularly like it. I know Matt, he's a very fair guy, so let's find out what he has to say. And this appeared in DWM issue 336. On a distant human colony, a bitter conflict is raging between the loyal adherents to the back-to-basics principles of the Founding Fathers and rebels who believe that the colony should embrace technology. Into the conflict comes a military ship from Earth that needs to prepare the colony for an influx of immigrants, a hibernating race of canine aliens, the Tyranians, who want to wipe out the humans completely, and the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, who just want to get back to the TARDIS. Colony of Lies touches on topical questions of unfettered immigration, modernisation and genetic engineering. Unfortunately, it fails to explore any of those questions in a meaningful way, preferring to descend into a dismal pastiche of Star Trek Insurrection, right down to the invisible base concealed in a lake. What particularly grates is the trite and hackneyed characterisation. Motivations are crude and unconvincing. Billy Joe runs off to join the realists because of what happened to his father. And characters seem to undergo personality changes on a whim. The hardened space captain Major Carter commits suicide, while his career-minded second-in-command decides to throw it all in to become a colonist. Worse, when the de facto Terranian leader, Zenig, accepts that his people are actually genetically altered humans merely on the basis of a video of a dead human, he's abandoning a lifetime of conditioning on the say-so of his mortal enemy. The plotting is desperately lazy. People continually realise plot points instinctively, hence Billy Joe instinctively feels he can trust Zoe, and Zoe instinctively realises that an asteroid belt is actually a ring of artificial satellites. In fact, Zoe seems to have added second sight to her list of talents, as she resolves to warn the inhabitants of Exista 4 about the true scale of a refugee problem that she's never been told about. This out-of-character behaviour extends to the Second Doctor, who appears to have developed an unhealthy obsession with the Time Lords, and the Seventh Doctor, who may not have been averse to leaving messages for himself to find, but who would surely have thought twice about passing data crystals to his previous incarnations just to help them out of a tight spot. Jamie, at least, is his dependable self, thinking with his fists and getting into a couple of mildly diverting fights. The book feels like a first draft, complete with appalling prose. He knew the truth, and he'd had enough of the lies, and pages of info dump about the back-to-basics ideal of the original colonists. What is particularly depressing about Colony of Lies is that, even for a first draft, there's nothing here that hasn't been done, more successfully, elsewhere. The most interesting idea, the effects of intensive immigration on a society, is never addressed because the novel concludes before the immigrants arrive. Because of the number of different parties involved in the conflict, the book never seems to develop any one idea into anything worthwhile. As a result, a lot happens, but none of it means very much. The book reads like the novelisation of a story that the author hasn't quite understood. There are a few decent bits to be picked out. When the Doctor observes that the colony is based on a myth of the American West, rather than the ever-evolving reality, and that the drive to colonise the Western states was made possible by the most potent symbol of 19th century modernisation, the railway. He's pointing out that the lie on which the colony is founded is more than just the ill-gotten fortune of Stuart Ransom. Likewise, when the cryogenically preserved Kiran Ransom is revived, she swiftly passes a harsh judgment on the conservative lifestyle of the Loyalists, who have perverted the original colonists' idealism to an inflexible ideology. But, for the most part, the book's insights are fatuous, and it tends to focus on plodding action sequences, such as Zoe's Star Wars-style escape from the starship Hannibal, rather than expanding on these themes. Poorly written and badly plotted, this is the worst book that the BBC has published in quite some time. With 40 years to perfect the formula, there's really no excuse for this infuriating nonsense. Told you, Matt didn't like it. That said, over in Goodreads, it's a little bit more popular. It's got a rating of 3.10, it's had 96 ratings and 10 reviews. Of those, 5 stars 8%, 4 stars 18%, 3 stars 52%, 2 stars 16%, 1 star 4%. Let's read some of these reviews. 5 stars from Vaclav Kratchotville. He says, book with spark and a smiley emoji. Can't go wrong with that then. 4 stars from David Layton, who always leaves thoughtful reviews. Though the book has a setting in a quasi-Western town on another world, and one character speaks in a somewhat Western-like manner, it really is not a Western at all. Brake may have been attempting something like a Western with a frontier town, a displaced earlier settlement, i.e. the Injuns, and something like the cavalry in the Earth Federation troops. However, the novel is more straightforward science fiction than anything else. The story and type are of the back-to-basics, pun intended for those who read the book, late 1970s style. The reaction against the literary flights of fancy of the 1960s and early 1970s. It has the manner of John Varley or early George R.R. Martin to it, perhaps even Orson Scott Card. Brake does manage to keep some surprises well hidden, while at the same time logical when they arrive. The book does not have much in the way of original ideas, but instead takes some well-known elements and combines them in a novel way. There are a few bits to quibble about. How can Jamie hold his own in a one-on-one fight with the biggest and toughest alien dog, when repeatedly these dogs have shown the strength to rip apart doors and fling humans as if they were pillows? Does Zoe have to be on the brink of death 3 times? Why is the colonists' difficulties in getting pregnant not explained? Why is it that Federation official Green is made out to be something other than human, but is really just another slimy political hack? Of course, the whole problem for most readers will be the wholly unnecessary fanwank of having a 7th Doctor cameo. To wrap up, despite a few gaffes, the book is a brisk read with science fiction elements put to good use. There's a 4-star review from Frank Davis. This is a great story and is well written. A good 2 adventure with an unexpected appearance by Sivan and Ace. Ugh, Doctors referred to by numbers. Don't do it, kids. 3 stars from Josh. An interesting one. Begins and ends with the 7th Doctor and Ace, but the majority is with the 2nd Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. Normally this kind of story would be a bit boring for me, but I really like the characterisation, and Zoe was amazing in this. Finally, a 2-star review from Daniel Kukwa. Why is it that every SF fantasy series can't resist doing a space western? They never turn out well, and they never make much sense. The original Star Trek got away with it because its episode was a surreal dreamscape, and Doctor Who and TV got away with it because its episode was set in an actual 19th century town with a twist. But western towns in space? Sigh, never a good thing, and it's not really much of anything here. This is bland and silly, and reads like a waste of time. Another Colin Brake novel that didn't do anything for me. And why have the framing device of the 7th Doctor and Ace around the 2nd Doctor Jamie Zoe story? It's not even necessary. I suppose there are space western fans out there. Shudder, but I'm not one of them. Not exactly the book I was hoping for to mark my 4,000th entry on Goodreads. Sorry to hear that, Daniel. Lots of your other reviews have been very positive though, which is good. If you've enjoyed our podcast today, please feel free to leave a review for it from wherever you get your podcasts from, whether it's Apple Tunes, iTunes, whatever they want to call it, Podbean, anywhere else like that. Please do feel free to say something nice. You can follow us on social media at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter, at Finish Scene on Blue Sky, and we have a Facebook group as well. So it's time to go, and we're going to play out the track, and here's one that I think is a bit of a favourite of mine from the 80s. It's from the Thompson Twins, and it's Lies. Yeah. So until next time, I've been Kenny Smith. Bye-bye.
You told me you love me, so I don't understand why promises are snapped in two, words are made to bend. Bigger, better, some stolen from Japan, collected from around the world, I'll catch you if they can. Lies, 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 yeah. Lies, 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 yeah. Lies, 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 yeah. Lies, 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 yeah. Do I have to catch you out to know what's on your mind? Well, Cleopatra died for Egypt. What a waste of time. White ones and red ones, and some you can't disguise. Twisted truth and